This is Portal with ray tracing. Named Portal RTX, it's Portal running with RTX features via RTX Remix powered by Nvidia Omniverse. If that sounds confusing, don't worry, I find it confusing too. It still sounds too good to be true that you can get an old game, press a button and boom, it's ray traced. But that's kind of the idea behind Portal RTX, although this has also had months of custom touches and polish added to it to really bring it up to the standards of a cutting-edge ray traced title. So while Portal RTX was done by Nvidia themselves, the programs they're using to do this are being released for everyone to use, so we can expect modders in the community to make their own ray traced versions of other older games very soon. If I had to guess a timeline, we're talking weeks or months instead of years. If my limited understanding about this tech is correct, it gets the game before it's shown on your screen and swaps it all out for modernised assets and ray-traced features, essentially bypassing any graphical limitations with the base game and allowing the modder to do whatever they please with what's seen in-game. Like I said, it sounds too good to be true, but with Portal RTX at least, it seems to work. Much like Portal itself, there are two parts to this video covering the two parts of Portal. The first is relatively spoiler-free, but kind of boring because RTX works well in this bit of the game. And the second bit of this video is the spoilery part of the game, and where the RTX overhaul doesn't work quite so well. So without spoiling anything too much, if you're new to Portal, then either play the vanilla Portal or the RTX one but with the old materials, because some of the new ones can make the later bit of the game more confusing. Not unplayable, but just not as readable. You have been warned. I will be doing a video comparing the ray-traced version against the non-ray-traced one, but just know that it's not a simple press of a button kind of comparison. In Portal RTX, you can disable the new assets and materials for a more faithful and readable experience, but you can't really disable the ray tracing, so you're sort of left with a slightly broken hybrid of the two. Or at least, I couldn't find a way of disabling ray tracing. I bet Digital Foundry will find some hacky way of doing it. But the best way I found to do comparisons involved comparing Portal RTX against Portal, and because everything's changed, it makes the direct changes that ray tracing has made more difficult to see. So this video will focus on Portal RTX and what it's like. Graphics have come on in leaps and bounds in recent years, yet something about this still feels eerily futuristic. To be able to extract and to swap out assets in an old, otherwise unsupported title, and to give it cutting-edge ray trace features is bordering on magic. But I've had a few technical issues with it so far. As far as programs go, it feels a little bit unstable. Overlays don't work too well with it, mouse cursors often don't appear when they need to, it crashed on one of the loading screens, alt-tabbing would sometimes prevent me from getting back into the game again, and when it did crash, parts of the process remained running in the background and I found it easiest just to restart my PC. That being said, a lot of these crashes seem to come from me trying to record the screen or from dabbling with the RTX menus. When I was content with simply playing the game, it behaved a lot better. But something about the experience doesn't feel 100% stable to me, so just be warned and try to stay away from the F9 button, which seemed to be the source of a lot of my problems. One of the concerns I've seen numerous people saying is that Portal RTX betrays the game's art style, which, looking back, seems to all come from one particular YouTube video on the topic, which is an interesting one to watch and I suggest you check it out. Now I've seen that video, I can sort of see what he's saying, but it still doesn't bother me too much. At least not for the bulk of the playthrough. I first tried Portal RTX before watching that video, and honestly, as somebody who has played, enjoyed and completed both Portals several times in the past, my first thought when I loaded up Portal RTX was how subtle the effect looked. I mean, sure, the reflective glass looked slick, and there were sharp looking shadows that I presumed weren't there previously, but it was only when I compared it with the vanilla Portal that the full scale of the makeover became apparent to me, and also at how dated Portal's graphics look in 2022. So there, my first genuine impression from trying Portal RTX was a positive one, being that it was Portal but with improved graphics and lighting, and with lots of cool ray-traced stuff to mess with. And I want to hold on to those first impressions of mine because I know when this goes public on the 8th, it will quickly be decided whether Portal RTX is great or terrible. But I guess it really boils down to what you want from a remade version of Portal. For me, I love that it's Portal, but with fancy new graphics and with adjustments to its assets to better showcase these new effects. And the Portals provide some unique ways of showcasing them. So while fans of the original Portal can stick to that, I see Portal RTX as a great excuse to replay it and to marvel at how ray tracing, PBR materials and high poly assets can overhaul an otherwise familiar experience, using today's computing power to brute force good looking visuals into games that could otherwise be visually stuck in the past forever. Now the original Portal already had ray tracing, it was just that it was static and pre-calculated. To help showcase the possibilities, Nvidia have added new light sources to the levels, particularly around the corners of rooms, and to have emissive materials on companion cubes and the like. It all looks great, and all works seamlessly through the portals. Stuff emits light and it bounces off stuff and is obscured by other things in an entirely realistic way. I can push myself up against a wall and see my shadow, or hold something reflective and see myself reflected in it, as well as a distorted view of whatever's around the other side. It's real endgame stuff. I can't imagine Portal ever receiving another jump in graphical quality that will make me think, wow, like this one is. Sure, VR perhaps, higher frame rates and resolutions, but Portal RTX is already hitting a standard I expect all ray-traced titles moving forward to aspire to hit. My mind can't comprehend the calculations required here, but luckily ray tracing can, so there. And the ray tracing isn't just the lighting or the reflections, it's everything. Every type of ray tracing imaginable, all working together as I feel ray tracing should be done in games. Put it simply, if we could run this at infinite frames a second and at an infinite resolution, then it would look pretty much perfect. But because we're not, the tricks and shortcuts used can be seen. To hit playable frame rates with existing hardware, this kind of technology relies heavily on denoisers, upscalers, and on other clever tricks. As hardware advances, these limitations will gradually fade away, but they are currently needed to hit the sweet spot between visual fidelity and playable frame rates. The main compromise that's being made here is in how quickly the effects can resolve to a sharp, crisp standard. For instance, it can take dozens of frames for bounce lighting to catch up with the action. Some of the reflections can be a little bit shimmery due to the limited sampling data, and some of the shadows can look a bit denoised as they're taking form. This will all be reduced as the ray count increases and as the frame rate improves, which will happen naturally as time goes by. On a Geforce 4090, the experience was perfectly playable at 4K. I couldn't confirm the exact frame rate as my usual frame rate overlays didn't work with this game, which I guess is because Portal RTX is already an overlay of sorts. I didn't have time to investigate. But I could tell that it wasn't running at hundreds of frames a second. But for Portal's kind of gameplay, the mouse movements felt responsive enough, since most of it is spent gliding through the air and passing through portals, which isn't exactly Twitch shooting. The majority of my time on Portal RTX was spent with DLSS 3 on, but I disabled it for a later portion of the game and the frame rate certainly didn't feel as smooth. It wasn't slow by any means, but looked closer to 50 or 60 than 100. So I actually took whatever delay DLSS 3 comes with and turned it back on again, and I didn't notice any sort of visual artifacts with it until the very last cutscene. So to put it into context, I'm using a Geforce 4090, so you'd expect great performance. But I am running it fully ray traced at 4K. But then I'm also using DLSS on auto mode, which I assume scales to maintain a decent frame rate. But then it did achieve that, and looked great. So ballpark figures based on the 4090 managing 4K would put the 3080 as being a capable 1440p card, and maybe a 2070 Super for 1080p gaming. But the minimum recommended spec for this game is a 3060, so technically the 2060 isn't good enough, nor is the 3050. I would be surprised if they couldn't run it at all, but this is what Steam's saying. And while an RTX card is required to make RTX mods, any card with Vulkan ray tracing support should be able to run this game. So the Radeon 6000 and upcoming 7000 series should be able to run this, as should Intel's Arc cards. And I guess in theory, even the Steam Deck could theoretically handle this to some degree. Just probably not many degrees. You may remember Quake 2 RTX from a few years ago, which was the same sort of idea, but was more of a manually created tester by Nvidia, which I guess was done to see how feasible such a concept was. But Portal RTX is the first title based on this real deal remix powered system. I still can't believe that this is a thing. Not so much what it is, but rather how it was achieved. To think that it doesn't need developer support. It can just get a game released 20 years ago and to swap all its stuff out in real time. That still seems too good to be true to me. But it is a thing, and I expect to see many more things like this in the not too distant future. Because now Nvidia have got the framework in place for this, you can expect to see it being used to ray trace many DirectX 8 and 9 games. These were generally released between about 2002 and 2014. This doesn't apply to every game from that era, but it's already been shown running on Morrowind and now on Portal, with no doubt many more titles to follow. If I'm honest, Portal isn't even the source game I'd most want to see this technology used for. I'd love to see it being used in Left 4 Dead, or to see what CSGO maps might look like when using ray tracing, which at this point may as well be seen as Source 3 graphics. And then of course there's Half-Life 2, which I'd drop everything in a heartbeat for, just to be able to play again with ray tracing on. But I guess Portal's a good start, and it's a well-developed port. I think this is a massive game changer for all games moving forward. But failing that, it's still going to massively shake up the modding community, and I'm already expecting all kinds of imaginative and reimagined releases of older titles. Maybe even the original developers of those games will be keen to remaster their older titles with this sort of technology. So while Morrowind with ray tracing may look fantastic, I'm sure what we all want right now is another version of Skyrim. Right, I've left spoilers until the end. Click off now if you still haven't played Portal. Any of you aged 15 or under might not have been born when it was released, so I'll let you off. Put it simply, the RTX materials worked fine for most of this game, but after you escape from a particular test chamber, form takes priority over function, and it can be difficult to know which surfaces can have portals on and which can't, with this rusty iron surface being one such offender in certain lighting conditions. Now, your crosshair does say whether or not you can fire a portal where you're currently looking, and there isn't any penalty for firing as many shots as you'd like, so it's hardly a big deal, but it does make the game less readable. You can change it to the original materials to make it more readable, but that kind of feels like you're ruining the futuristic thing you're trying to experience with Portal RTX. Or at least it did to me. I also found the glass tubes you ride through to be too transparent. Bar scenery reflections, they're totally invisible, which can make them difficult to see. A bit of translucency would have gone a long way here. Meanwhile, some of the glass walls you see later on can't be seen through that clearly, and presumably, as they're out of the playable space, the other side hasn't been lit up for this ray-traced version. And in the final boss battle, the countdown doesn't show too clearly either. I'm far from a Portal expert, yet these things stood out in that one playthrough I had with RTX on, so it's a shame that nobody working on this port picked up on these things. I doubt any of these things would take too much effort to fix, so it's baffling why they were left in as such low-hanging targets for anybody looking for an excuse to hate on the ray tracing. I hate to put graphics over gameplay, but come on, it's ray-traced Portal. No, it isn't always as readable as non-ray-traced Portal. No, that isn't necessarily the ray tracing's fault. Yes, it probably is an easy fix, but even as is, Portal RTX is playable, and you'll know if it's for you. If you enjoy blocking light sources with objects, creating dark corners with props, or casting weird lights in dark places with portals, then Portal RTX is the perfect game for you. It's an excellent visual example of how ray tracing can be used to transform the look of a game, and to showcase the incredible makeover that RTX remakes can give to older titles. Like, this is it. This is the Portal remake we never asked for, but if we were asked, then we would definitely have nodded and said yes please. And it's free for Portal owners. Grab it while it's hot, but not too hot. Deja vu.